Prologue. The map beneath the ashes. The wind howled through the blackened husks of the Drakenreach Mountains. Snow didn't fall here, only ash, soft as whispers, drifting endlessly from the old volcano's mouth, like the breath of something ancient, something forgotten. The sky was the color of bruised silver, and beneath it a solitary figure climbed over the ruins of a once great city, its name long erased from stone and memory. Kael's boots crunched over charred bone. He didn't flinch anymore. The parchment in his hand was older than war. Its ink faded and margins curled with heat, but the markings still pulsed with a strange warmth, a phoenix sigil drawn in blood, elvish runes whispering of a place untouched by time. And in the center of it all, a single word scorched deep into the leather, Elarindor. Kael didn't know what it meant, only that it had been etched into the dying words of his father, a scholar turned madman whose final breath spoke of gods buried under mountains and keys hidden in the hearts of men. The cave stood before him like the mouth of a waiting beast. Its walls shimmered, not with light but with memories, flickers of faces, old songs, battles never won. Kael reached into his pack, pulling free a piece of obsidian no larger than a thumb. The moment it neared the entrance, the rock hummed, and the cave opened, not like stone cracking, but like silence breaking. Inside, the air was warm. The walls pulsed like living veins, glowing faintly gold, then violet, then black. At the center lay a dais, and upon it, something wrapped in thick velvet. Kael's hands shook. He had chased stories for a decade. He had bled in marshes, bargained with witches, lost friends to the rift storms in the west. All for this. He pulled the cloth away. Beneath it was no weapon, no crown, no jewel. It was a map, glowing faintly, alive. The lines shimmered, reshaping. With each heartbeat, forests growing, rivers shrinking, cities vanishing and reappearing, and at the heart of the shifting continent, the word returned Elarindor. A whisper touched his ears, not from the cave, but from the stone in his pocket. It had never spoken before. If you seek Elarindor, beware the ritual of the sixth flame. For the gods sleep in silence and wake in fire. Kael looked up, eyes burning. He didn't know what waited beyond the edges of this map, only that he would follow it. For within him burned a question no one else dared ask. What did we forget when we chose to forget the gods? Chapter 1. A stranger at the Firepost Inn. The Firepost Inn stood at the edge of everything, not quite part of the lowland towns, not yet swallowed by the Hollowhorn forest. It clung to a lonely stretch of road like a lantern in a storm. Traders called it cursed, vagabonds called it safe. But for Kael, it was the last place where maps were still ink and not breath. Smoke curled from its crooked chimney as twilight fell, painting the sky in blood and gold. A wooden sign, burned on one side, clawed on the other, creaked above the door. It depicted a torch, half melted, still burning. Kael pushed open the door. Warmth greeted him, and silence. Inside, the inn was modest. Tables carved from old boats, walls lined with weapons no one used anymore, axes from the sea-borne wars, spears tipped in ironwood, even a pair of beastman tusks yellowed with age. A fire crackled in the hearth, but none of the 5 patrons so much as glanced his way, except one. A woman in dark leather leaned in the corner, her eyes reflecting the fire like a cat's. A hood shadowed her features, but Kael saw the long, elven ears poking through silver hair. She lifted her mug in greeting, then turned back to her drink. Kael sat near the fire. He had learned not to speak first, not in places like this. The barkeep, a squat man with scars like rivers down his face, brought him a drink without being asked. Kael nodded, placed 2 copper thalers on the table and began unrolling the glowing map. Instantly the fire dimmed. The runes on the map came alive, dancing in patterns that no ink should know, lines curved in real time as if drawn by invisible hands. The inn's patrons all looked now, eyes narrowed, jaws tense. "Where did you get that?" The woman's voice sliced through the silence. Kael didn't look up. "Found it in the bones of a city eaten by fire." You're lying, she said softly, standing. That map is forbidden. It bears the mark of Verial, the flame-bound. Only 2 copies ever existed. One was burned with the temples of Elshan. The other was under a volcano, Kael finished, awaiting for someone stupid enough to follow a dead man's whispers. She stepped forward. Kael saw now, beneath her hood, her eyes weren't just elven. They were starborn, glowing with faint silver trails, like comets frozen in time. You shouldn't be here, she said. Not with that. Neither should you. There was a beat of stillness, then the ground shook only once, but enough to make the mugs clink and the tusks rattle on the walls. The barkeep froze. The woman tensed. Kael turned to the fire. The flames had turned green, not flickering, not roaring, just still, as if frozen in memory. Then from the fire came a voice, low, echoing. The 6th flame rises. The hunt begins. Elarindor awakens. The fire went out. In its place only ash. When Kael looked back, the elven woman was gone. So were the other patrons. Only the barkeep remained, white as bone. You brought it here, he whispered. Kael stood, heart pounding. The map pulsed in his hands. I don't know what I've brought, he said, but I know where I'm going. Outside, snow began to fall, except it wasn't snow, it was ash again. Chapter 2. The Hollowhorn Forest and the Moonlit Pact. The Hollowhorn Forest did not appear on any map. It didn't need to. Everyone in the east knew where it began, where trees grew too close together, where the wind stopped singing and started listening. But no one knew where it ended. Travelers who stepped too far never stepped back. The forest remembered every footprint, but returned none. Kael stood at its edge. The ash had followed him for days. At first he thought it came from the wind, but now he knew better. It clung to him, his cloak, his boots, even the pages of the living map. The glow had faded, but the lines still shifted beneath his touch, like veins under skin. Above him, twisted branches clawed at the sky. He stepped inside. Instantly the world changed. The sun vanished. No birds, no wind. Only the sound of his own breath. Moss covered everything. Trees, rocks, even the air felt thick with age. Like walking into a memory too old to remember itself. After 2 days he began to hear the voices. At first they whispered his name. Kael, Kael. Then they laughed. On the 3rd night he set camp beside a dead stream. The water ran backwards. He didn't drink. As he laid out his bedroll, the map unrolled itself, glowed faintly. A single symbol had appeared, etched in blue. Fire. A stag's head with crescent antlers. He stared at it. Then the trees began to move. Not with wind, not with life, but like a curtain parting on a stage, and from between 2 ashwood trunks stepped a figure. It walked like a man. But no, man stood 7 feet tall with hooves for feet, and antlers branching like frozen lightning. Its eyes were liquid gold, and its skin shimmered like moonlight on water. It spoke without lips. You carry the flame of Verial. Kael didn't move. I carry a map, that's all. The map is flame. The flame is memory. Memory is power. Power draws hunger. Kael stood slowly. What are you? The creature tilted its head. I am Pact Father, Warden of the Hollowhorn, first of the Moonlit Court. Kael had heard of the Moonlit Court. Elven tales, children's stories, a secret society of oathbound spirits bound by pacts older than war. They were said to guide the chosen or devour the lost. You're real. More real than you. Fireborn. Kael's hand drifted to the map. Then help me. I seek Elarindor. The creature blinked, slow and sad. All who seek Elarindor must pay the price. All who bear the 6th flame must bleed before the moon. Kael's voice was dry. And if I refuse, then the forest will keep you, and you shall become its root. From the trees, shapes emerged, elk-headed beings in cloaks of bark, children of the Pact Father. They formed a circle around Kael, silent and still. The Pact Father raised one hand, in it a dagger of ice. Kneel, offer blood, seal the pact. Kael hesitated, but something in the map stirred. A pulse. A memory not his own. A woman weeping before a black tree. A boy, crowned in flame. A forest. Burning. Kael stepped forward. He took the dagger, and he cut his palm. Blood dripped onto the roots. The forest trembled. "So be it," the Pact Father said. "You are marked." The elk-men bowed, and Kael heard it, not in his ears, but in his soul. One path closed, one path opened. The moon watches. The hunt begins. The map glowed again. This time it bled. Chapter 3. Song of the Skyward Elves. It began with music. Not the kind played by hands or lips, but the kind carried by wind, threaded through moonlight, echoing from the marrow of stars. Kael heard it even as he slept, a haunting hum that tugged at his bones, pulling him northward. 3 days after the pact, the trees gave way to stone. Ancient steps carved into a cliffside led Kael upward. With each step, the air thinned. The ash stopped following him. And when he reached the summit, his breath caught, not from exhaustion, but awe. Above him floated a city made of light. Towers shimmered in the air, suspended by invisible magic, bridges of crystal connecting them like veins in a glass heart. Waterfalls poured from the clouds upward, and massive birds with silver feathers soared between balconies that glowed like dusk. Elarindor, the skyward city, it was said to have left. The world after the First War of Flame, said to be unreachable unless called, and Kael understood now it hadn't vanished. It had simply chosen not to be seen. He stepped onto a bridge of air. It held him. As he crossed, figures in robes of starlight watched silently. Elves, yes, but not of the forest or the court. These were tall, luminous beings, with faces half hidden, behind masks of bone and silver. They did not speak. One of them raised a hand, and the bridge curved. Kael followed. They brought him to a dome of glass, floating above the highest spire. Inside, a single elf stood waiting, hair the color of lightning, eyes like frozen suns, and a voice that echoed even in silence. "You carry the wound of the forest," she said, "and the fire of Veriel." Kael nodded. "I seek Elarindor." She did not move. "Then you must first hear the song of forgetting." Before Kael could ask, she raised her hands, and the walls around them disappeared. Suddenly he stood in the past. Below him a world burned, great beasts made of stone and shadow tore through cities. The sky split, and in the center of it all a boy in chains, crowned with fire, screaming as gods knelt before him. The vision changed. The boy stood alone in the center of a tree, its roots tangled with corpses, its branches feeding on light. A voice whispered, "Burn the name, seal the gate, let no one remember." Then darkness. Kael gasped, falling back. The elf stood over him. "That was the first flame," she said softly, "and the price we paid to forget. You now carry the sixth, the last." Kael clutched the map. "Why me?" She looked away. "Because your father was one of us, and he broke the oath of silence." Kael's world tilted. "You knew him?" "He was the last Flamekeeper, until he fled." Kael remembered the madness, the dreams, the voice his father heard even in sleep. "What is Elarindor?" he whispered. She looked at him with eyes that held galaxies. A prison, a god, a lie, a key. Outside, thunder cracked the sky. "And now," she said, "the beastmen know. You walk. They will hunt. They always do." Kael's heart thundered. "Then tell me how to reach it." The elf stepped close, placing her hand over his heart. With blood, with memory, with song. She reached into her cloak and pulled out a stone, a shard of sky. It pulsed in his hand. "This will guide you through the storm belt." He didn't know what that was, but he knew it sounded like death. The elf stepped back. "Go now, before." The music turned to teeth. Kael nodded. As he left the dome, the bridge behind him collapsed into mist. Above, the city began to fade. Elarindor had sung its warning. Now came the storm. Chapter 4. Blood Tides of the Beastmen. Arena the storm belt was a graveyard of wind. Kael crossed it with nothing but the sky shard's glow and the whisper of the Pact Father echoing in his skull. Lightning carved shapes into the horizon, claws, wings, burning eyes, and sand rose in spirals like the breath of old gods. He didn't remember when he was taken, only the blur of claws, the sting of poison, the taste of blood in his mouth. When he woke, he was in a cage. The bars were bones. The floor wet with something thick and red. Around him, shadows loomed. Shapes not fully man, not fully beast. Fur and fang, horn and hoof, their breath heavy with iron and musk. Beastfolk. Kael had heard of them in taverns, savage raiders of the southern plains, warriors bound by blood rites and ruled by the moon. But here, in the pit of their land, he saw the truth. They were not beasts, they were kings of pain, and he was their guest. Outside the cage, the sand roared. Not with wind, with voices. Hundreds of them chanting, crying for blood, for combat, for the old laws, the arena of thorns, a pit sunken into a crater, its walls ringed with jagged tusks and banners of skin. At its center stood a platform of bones, and on it the war chief, massive, clad in black leather crowned with the skull of a giant lion, eyes like molten gold. He raised a blade carved from obsidian and spoke in a tongue of war. "The fire-blooded comes, let the trial begin." Kael was dragged out. No armor, no weapon, just scars and silence. They threw him into the pit. A cross. From him, a beastman 3 times his size, body painted in white ash, wielding a hammer that still dripped blood. The war chief roared. The crowd answered. Kael stood. The map pulsed in his chest. The cut on his hand, the one from the pact, began. "Toe burn." Then he heard it. A hum. The same hum from the skyward city, but deeper. Angrier, calling not to his ears but to his blood. The beastman charged. Kael moved without thought. He ducked the hammer, slid beneath the swing, and pressed his palm to the sand. The arena shook. Flame erupted. Not red, not orange, but white. The crowd fell silent. The beastman stumbled back. From Kael's palm, a symbol had burned into the ground, the same one from the map, the stag with crescent antlers. But now, it bled fire. Kael stood, eyes glowing. He didn't know the words that came from his mouth. But they weren't his, they were old, they were sacred, they were a song. The beastman fell to his knees. The crowd gasped, and the war chief lowered his blade. "He bears the ember," he said. "He is no prisoner." He stepped down, walked toward Kael, and knelt. "He is the chosen of flame, the one who brings the 7th hunt." Kael's breath caught. "I just want answers," he whispered. "Then you must survive the rite of bone. At moonrise you will bleed beneath the black tree, and if it does not devour you—" The war chief smiled. "You may ask a single question. Any question." Kael looked at his palm. The fire had faded, but the burn remained. Chapter 5. The Oracle of Shattered Waters. Night in the wastes of Varthun was not quiet. The wind sang in tongues no mortal wrote down, and the bones of the dead echoed beneath the sand like restless drums. Kael rode alone, astride a beast, called a vekir, half feline, half reptile, gifted to him by the war chief. He had survived the rite of bone. Barely. The black tree had clawed into his soul, peeling memory from marrow. He had screamed for hours, seen faces not his own, lived lives that weren't his. 1,000 years of history compressed into pain. But he endured. And when it was done, the tree bled silver from its bark, a sign of passage. Now, the map pulsed. Steadily with heat. It led him toward a shimmer on the horizon, a mirage at first, then a shape, then a ruin, the oasis of shattered waters. The last place the gods had ever spoken. It wasn't an oasis in the way stories told, no lush palms or crystalline ponds. It was a broken basin of mirrors, hundreds of them, cracked and tilted, scattered. Across the desert floor, some as tall as towers, others sunken halfway in sand. Kael dismounted. The air was wrong here. No wind, no heat. Just a pressure, a presence. Like the entire world had turned its gaze inward. He stepped into the maze of mirrors. Each one reflected not his face, but a version of himself. Younger, older, broken, crowned, dead, burning. 1,000 Kaels, none of them him, yet all of them watching. At the center stood a pool of black water. Above it, a woman, she was blindfolded. her skin pale as moon-bleached stone, her hands folded over her chest. Her robes flowed like ink in reverse. Her voice arrived before her lips moved. "You seek what no man should remember." Kael approached. "I seek truth." "Then offer a lie." He hesitated. Then, "I am ready." She smiled. "That is the first lie." She raised a hand, and the waters rippled. Kael saw himself, not as he was, but as the world remembered him. As a child, buried in flame. As a soldier, holding a dying friend. As a thief, laughing with bloodied hands. As a son, watching. Father go mad. Then Mador, a black gate of flame bound by 6 chains, each with a sigil, forest, sky, blood, mirror, bone, silence, and behind it, a name he didn't know, but his soul recognized, Elarindor. The woman's voice rang like a bell breaking. "It is not a place, it is a being, a god not born but sealed. To awaken it is to end the world as it was." Kael stepped back. "Then why do I see it? Why do I dream of it?" "Because you are its echo." He didn't understand. "What am I?" The oracle touched his chest. A mirror, a matchstick, a mouthpiece. Her voice became 2 voices. 3, 10, a chorus of echoes. "You are the last flamekeeper, and the first herald." The water boiled. A hand reached from the pool Kael's own. It dragged him down, and he sank into fire, into ice, into every moment he had lived and every death he had avoided. When he awoke, he was outside the mirrors, alone. The Vekir waited. The map was glowing again. This time the lines were clearer. They all led to one place now, the festival of flame and bone, and Kael understood. Elarindor would not be found. It would be unleashed. Chapter 6. The Festival of Flame and Bone. They came from every corner of the world. Elves cloaked in starlight, beastmen marked by war paint, dune riders from the ashen south, and even the mountain-forged, iron-skinned nomads who hadn't left their peaks in 100 years. All drawn by the same dream, the same whisper, the same pull of fire under their skin. The Festival of Flame and Bone happened once every century, not a celebration, a warning, a prayer wrapped in blood and pageantry, meant to keep the slumbering. Flame beneath the earth, asleep. Kael stood at the edge of the obsidian amphitheater, watching as the crowd filled the stone steps in reverent silence. The air pulsed with drums, low and ancient. Fires burned without smoke, casting long shadows across runes etched into the very rock. He clutched the map. It no longer shifted. It had become still, like a breath held before a scream. A priestess approached him. She wore no eyes, only golden, wax across her lids and a crown of scorched feathers. Her voice crackled like kindling. "The echo has come." Kael tensed. "You know who I am?" "We knew when the stars turned red, when the ice cracked in the north, when the children began dreaming of fire." She extended a hand. In it, a bone key, carved from something ancient and not quite animal. "You are to be the final flame." Kael didn't move. "Final? Each chain that binds the god must be broken in ritual. You have walked through 5. Forest, sky, blood, mirror, bone. 1 remains." Kael's mind reeled. "And then what?" She leaned close. Her breath was warm and wrong. "Then the god wakes, and the world is given one last choice." Before Kael could ask, the drums stopped. The amphitheater fell silent. In the center of the stone circle, a platform of ribs rose from the earth. Upon it, 6 figures emerged, 1 from each race. Each bore a torch. Each placed it at the corners of a sigil carved into the floor. Kael's map began to glow. It pulsed in rhythm with the torches. The priestess beckoned. "It must be you." Kael stepped forward. The crowd inhaled as one. He reached the center of the platform. Before him, a basin of black flame. Beside it, a blade, glowing with runes that shifted between languages and lifetimes. The priestess spoke. "Will you speak the 7th word?" Kael looked at the blade, then the fire, then the crowd. He thought of his father's last words, of the tree that bled silver, of the oracle's warning. You are a mirror, a matchstick, a mouthpiece. He lifted the blade and drove it into his palm. Flame erupted from the wound. The amphitheater shook. The 6 torches flared white, and from beneath the stone, something answered. A sound without sound. A name without letters. It rose like breath beneath a locked door, the basin of black fire inverted, sucking instead of burning, drawing light, sound, memory, and Kael heard a voice. His voice, but older. You have spoken the 7th. The silence ends. Then everything shattered. Stone split. The sky turned crimson. The map burned away in his hand, revealing not a new path, but a door, floating above the ribbed altar, a gate of ash and starlight. Kael looked back. The crowd wasn't afraid. They were kneeling, in reverence, in surrender, in acceptance. The priestess whispered, "The herald walks. Elarindor opens." Kael stepped through the gate and vanished. Chapter 7. The betrayal beneath the starlit vault. Kael didn't fall. He drifted. Through a void lit not by sun or moon, but by memories. Images flared around him like lanterns, not of his life, but of the world's. A tree burning in a snowfield. Beast cradling a child made of flame. A throne of bones empty, and behind it all a whisper. You were never meant to remember. Then the light ended, and Kael stepped into the starlit vault. It was a chamber beneath the world, not carved, not built, but revealed. A place hidden beneath layers of reality, as if the earth itself had turned inside out. The ceiling was not stone, but sky, a perfect replica of the constellations, only older. The stars flickered in patterns no scholar had charted, languages made of light. Kael stood on a floor of mirrors, and in every reflection, he wasn't alone. He saw himself, yes, but also the figures who had guided him. The Pact Father, watching from the trees, the blindfolded elf in the Sky City, the Beastman Warchief with his obsidian blade, even the Oracle, her eyes still sealed. They were all here, watching, frozen in the glass. Kael turned and came face to face with the one he never expected. His father, not mad, not dying alive, clothed in robes of silver and ash, his eyes sharp, his hands steady. And in his palm the original map, not the one Kael had carried, but the first. Unburned, unchanged, still breathing. Kael's heart stopped. Father, the man did not smile. You shouldn't have come. I followed your clues, Kael said. Your voice in the cave, the map. You led me here. No, the man said coldly. I warned you. I buried the path so you wouldn't find it. Kael's mouth went dry. But you left the map because I was weak, because I thought maybe someone needed to remember. But now I see. He stepped forward, and Kael felt it. Power, burning, old. His father was not just a flamekeeper. He was the first flamekeeper. Elarindor must never wake. Kael shook his head. Then why the ritual? The pacts, the gate. The ritual was to seal it, not open it. Kael froze. The 7th word was never meant to be spoken, his father said. It's not a key, it's a trigger. Suddenly the vault trembled. The stars above shifted. Kael felt it. Something vast stirring beneath his feet. A heartbeat. You didn't open a door, his father whispered. You woke a god. Kael's breath caught. No. Yes, his father said, and now it will speak through you. The mirrors cracked. A voice bled from the air, deep, warm, infinite. Herald. Kael fell to his knees. The voice wasn't in his head, it was in his soul. You are the match, the mouth, the flame. The vault darkened. Only one reflection remained unbroken, the center mirror. Kael looked into it and saw himself, not alone, but inhabited. A second presence behind his eyes, watching, smiling, waiting. His father raised the map. There's only one way to stop it. Kael stood. I won't die for a mistake I didn't understand. His father didn't flinch. Then the world will. Kael drew the shard of sky from his pocket. Its light flared, silver against the ash. The vault split in half. The stars above fell, and Kael ran not away from his father, but toward the one place the god could still be bound, Elarindor. Chapter 8. The Last Ember of Elarindor. The land had changed. Where there was once forest, now stood a wasteland of molten stone. Rivers boiled, trees had turned to obsidian statues. The sky was no longer sky, just a storm of flame and silence. The world was holding its breath. Kael ran. The shard of sky in his grip burned brighter with every step, not with heat, but urgency. It pulsed in rhythm with the thing inside him, the voice, the presence, the god. He was not alone. It whispered, to him now, gently. There is no salvation, only remembrance. He clenched his jaw and kept moving. Before him stood the place no map had ever drawn, a city forged from living stone, its towers shaped like open hands, its streets lit by veins of ember. At the center stood a temple carved from a single endless flame, Elarindor. It wasn't a city, it was a tomb, and he was its key. Kael pushed open the temple doors. Inside, silence reigned. No dust, no decay. Just memory, thick and heavy like smoke. Statues lined the walls, beings with no faces, no names, only hands raised in offering. Each held a bowl filled with ash. Kael moved past them, deeper into the fire-lit corridor. At the center an altar, and upon it a flame, not burning, breathing. It pulsed in perfect time with the one in his chest. "You are here," the god whispered. "The mouth has found its voice." Kael fell to his knees. Visions came in a flood. The truth of the first flame. It had never been evil. It had been forgotten. A god not of destruction, but memory. A being who had offered humans the power to remember all, past lives, lost truths, the shape of time itself. And the people. They had panicked. They had feared. So they had sealed the god away, buried it beneath lies, rituals, silence. And now Kael, descendant of flamekeepers, bearer of blood and choice, had opened the door not to apocalypse, but to awakening. He reached out. The flame touched his hand, and for a moment he remembered everything, all his lives, all his deaths, all the chances he'd had to choose differently. Then the god spoke. "Speak the final word, and the world shall burn, or bloom." Kael stood. The sky outside cracked, the vault between worlds tearing open. He could end it, or remake it. Behind him, his father's voice. "Kael, don't!" The man stood in the doorway, bleeding, broken, map in hand, eyes pleading. "You don't know what you'll become." Kael looked at the flame, then at the world outside, trembling, waiting. He opened his mouth and spoke the word, not of fire, not of war, but of forgiveness. The flame flared and folded into him. There was no scream, no explosion, only light, soft, warm, and then silence. When Kael opened his eyes, he stood in the temple alone. The fire was gone. The storm had cleared. Outside, the world had not ended. It had begun. He stepped into a new dawn. The god no longer whispered. It remembered. And through Kael, so would the world. Epilogue. When the ashes whisper years passed, the world did not fall into ruin. It did not burn. It remembered. Villages once lost to silence began to dream again. Children painted flames on walls, not out of fear, but reverence. The pact father was seen walking through forests no longer hollow. The skyward elves returned to the stars, singing a softer song. Even the beastmen, once bound by rage, opened their arenas for stories. Not blood. In the sands of Varthun, the oasis of shattered waters filled again, not with memory but with peace. And deep beneath the bones of the world, the vault no longer trembled. It slept, not sealed, not forgotten, only quiet. Kael was never seen again. Some said he became fire, an ember riding the wind, guiding travelers through the darkest nights. Others claimed he wandered as a man with silver eyes and a map no longer made of paper, but of scars and stories. But the truth? It was whispered by the ash. When the wind is still and the stars are bright, some say you can hear it. He remembered so that we didn't have to forget again, and in the temple that once held a god, now overgrown with flowers that never burn, a single word is carved into the stone altar, Elarindor, not as a warning, but as a promise, that when the world forgets itself again, a herald will rise and the fire will return.